End of
We're
the
going
call.
live. We're going live.
Yes, Ankaj. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Meyer from GAI Insights, and welcome to our daily Gen AI news briefing where we discuss and rate top news items. Our team of AI analysts rate each article as essential, important, or optional for executives and leaders at companies. Today's discussion will be led by John.
Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, good evening in Australia, Adam. Today we've got some really interesting articles. A number of them deal with the issue of fakery. One, a financial transaction where somebody got over $200 million in Hong Kong dollars through a complex fake, and then fake IDs. Then we have some translation and meta capabilities that I think are creating interesting new things, a foundational model about the real world, and then a hope and an effort to make AI more democratic. So let's get into it. Adam, could you take a look at the Hong Kong problem?
Yeah, sure, John, I did. And I was actually a little bit on the fence about important or optional. In some ways, I would say that it's more news about deepfakes, and we've certainly talked quite a bit about that. I think what's important, and I'll get a little into it, is to understand the extent that the sophistication is growing. So in this case, it's that it wasn't just the voice of Biden or the image of Taylor Swift, but that an entire team was faked on a call. So it's a level of sophistication that it's important to be aware of. But at the end of the day, it's kind of what we would expect in some ways, which is a growing sophistication in how people are using these deepfake technologies to pull off things like this.
Yeah, for sure. Tim, what's your sense?
You're on mute.
On mute, Tim.
Thank you. Being polite. I think I voted important on this one. I want some verification on what exactly happened here, because there's a certain amount of silliness that can go on as well, even with these deep fakes. But we're going to have to get used to a new kind of security, just as back in the day, security had to start really training people about phishing. It's just a different kind of phishing, but potentially much more effective, as was shown here. So I think the issue of security, the issue of a new kind of phishing, just like Paul, we were talking about different kinds of errors that LLMs cause. They cause different kinds of security problems, and we're going to have to learn about them and deal with them. And this is an example.
Yeah, I think I'm going to land on important on this because it's the combination of the quality of the imagery plus its insertion into a whole multi-day phishing effort, and it's such a good story, for anybody interested in this. So let's rate this one important.
I agree with you, John, and I think having been in the large company that we wired money as a corporate VC to startups, right? We always had a lot of security in the process, and people live talking to the CEOs of the companies to ensure that the transactions are secure. This strikes in the core of that process. So the corporates will have to rewire those processes and redo them to make sure that they are aware of these fakes. So totally important factor.
Awesome. Excellent. If we could get to the next article, Ankash, please.
Yes.
Roblox.
So the next one is from Roblox. So they have
Yes.
introduced a new real-time AI chat feature.
Paul, can you kick us off on this one?
Sure. Yeah, so we've seen several of these real-time chat translators from Spanish to English or different languages. So I'd rate this one as optional, but I'm interested in others' opinions, and also did want to note that Ankaj has a summary display as well for the names of the articles and what we rate them. And so Ankaj, you may want to show that as we go or at the end, but optional on my end.
Yeah, I agree. Although it's really interesting, of course, the techno nerd industry has long been obsessed with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it's interesting that kind of the Babelfish is here, which was from that series where it could stuck a fish in your ear and it could translate from any language to any other language. So what's impressive was the number of languages involved here. And as you said, it's happening in a lot of places. but I think there's the trend is important, as we like to say sometimes. This particular article isn't that important, but the trend is important, that you're going to be able to rethink the ways you do business internationally.
For sure.
Amongst even different ethnic cultures and native speaking cultures.
Absolutely. Tanya?
One thing I thought was good morning, everyone, that I thought was interesting in the article is the level of engagement when you receive something in your native language, that they see customers get more engaged, whether it's the brand or the product, when that translation happens immediately. So for those in marketing and those that, I think that's an important topic.
Adam, I know you think people are underestimating Roblox here.
I just think, and this article touches on a little bit, that it's much more than a gaming platform, and that there is big business, and they're going after the longer term play with innovation and really creating next level experiences for interacting with customers in the metaverse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Roblox is an important platform. It's just this particular announcement about Roblox, as Paul said, there's a lot of this multilingual translation going on.
All right, so I need a show of hands on optional, and I go to important. Nobody's saying essential. Who's for optional?
I'm from optional.
Optional.
Optional it is. All right. Optional it is. Excellent. Thank you. Next one.
The next one.
Tanya, I don't know. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Akash. I interrupted.
Yeah, sorry, Ron. So the next one is so around neural networks, where they are being used to churn out fake IDs.
Yes.
And John, I'm happy to take this if you'd like.
Yes, I was just going to go there. Go ahead, Tanya.
That's what I thought you were heading at. Yeah, so this one, I mean, it's not new news to us, right? We've heard already of the deep fakes of Taylor Swift, the voice, how people are using your voice to get into through bank security. So it's not new, the topic, right? However, what I was blown away is the business opportunity for something so shady like this, right? Where this person or this company has created a way to make it so easy for anyone to get a fake ID, right? Back in the day when we were kids, my husband tells me, I did not grow up in this country, but my husband tells me, you would drive into New York City, and that's where, you would get your fake ID in a shady street. Now you do it from the comfort of your home, and you have so many options to make it so realistic, like to the point where, they talk about the background. It could look like a carpet, but they also talk about the actual photo. You can put the GPS coordinates of the photo, what camera took that photo, to have all of that detail, to me is just mind blowing. And that they have, the article goes into like, how did they capture all of this information? They would just put little ads out there saying, hey, will you be okay sharing a photo of your, like your passport or a photo of your, and all of this information has been collected. So anyway, I think the topic we all are aware of. I think it's raised another level of like, wow, this is a business in itself. And we as consumers need to be more vigilant of the service providers we use and ask them, what type of security do you have? So I went into optional and important on this because of everything I shared.
That's yes, other opinions? I thought one of the cool things on this thing was it did a good job of faking, getting past the know your customer rules on the cryptocurrency sites. And so, you create a fake person, and then you put the ID up and make that work, and then that was verified, at least on one of the crypto exchanges. And that's a big deal. When I was back at PwC, know your customer is a huge thing for financial services, and this is very dangerous in the context of that.
John, to that
I'd say important for the same reason as the first one. We're going to have to learn new ways of dealing with this. This is going to be harder because this is an arms race. So they'll get better at generating ways of breaking know your customer and other kinds of security systems. And we're going to have to get better at defeating them. And they're possible to defeat, but you just have to add more and more ways of doing it. And again, we sort of tend to do, in my opinion, the wrong thing, which is like we make the captchas harder and harder for the people who are legitimate customers. It kind of works, but it really adds a lot of friction if you're in the commerce business. So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into how do you keep these things under control without really making your customers you want impossible, making it impossible for them to get into your systems. And the other problem here is which has been going on for a while, is there's no law enforcement option. That's why these things can exist, because these people aren't in your territory. You have no jurisdiction over them. That's a problem that still hasn't been settled. There's not much an individual company can do about it, but you need to be aware about it and work towards international agreements to try and do something about these things.
Sure. Awesome. Well, sounds like you're landing on important for this one.
Yes.
Let's rate that one important, and let's head for the next article. Luda.
Yes.
You could take us some of the meta news, the news people are using AI to pay attention across languages here.
Yeah, I vacillated on from optional to important and rated it important. Not the article itself, because there will be others that will be doing that, essentially collating the news using AI. And there are others that are doing that. Semaphore actually did the alliance with Microsoft, and they are a good platform, it sounds like. But I rated it important for another reason. It's really using the new sort of federated social media, I call it a platform. So it's a movement that has been happening for a number of years after Twitter was acquired. And so there are several players that emerged in this federated news media movement. And this is a signal of maturation of that trend. And I think we'll see way more of that. And it's important for our audience to know that this is happening, because it will be much easier in some sense to do marketing and lead generation and things like that using those new platforms. They're highlighted in the article, but maybe, John, I can send you another article that kind of goes deeper into that. And for that reason, I think we should rate it as important.
Great. Let's go ahead and we will list that in the rating as we go out, the new article as well. So that sounds great. Adam, what do you think, man?
Yeah, I was on the edge between important and optional, leaning towards optional because of some of the limitations still in the technology and the capability to crawl sites and how people can sort of limit the scope of it themselves. And so how powerful really is it? But Luda's making some really good points that I hadn't considered of. So I'm definitely in the important camp now as well.
Awesome.
I hadn't thought sort of that broader picture in terms of stitching that together.
Yeah. I'd say important in the really bigger picture that they're making here, which will be interesting to see. It's a long ways from happening, but this is maybe the canary in the coal mine of the undermining of the kind of the Google model right now, which is do everything possible to trap you on my page so I can sell you more advertising. This is these people fighting back to try and get their own sites to be the landing place and the place where you dwell instead of the social media site or the search site.
Right. So essentially, maybe a couple of words, right? We think of Facebook. You have to like all your friends and you operate within the Facebook, right? You operate in all of these social media sites. You have to like the friends and bring them in, and that's your universe in that platform. What this is doing is trying to break those walls and allow any app to actually cross these walls And I think it's a very tall order. It hasn't taken on, it's a very old idea, very old, but it hasn't worked, right? Until now, it's starting to. There are many blockages. Adam, you're right. It can be locked like with governments and whatnot, but it is happening, and Semaphore is using it. So that's a good signal that this is good enough to be used.
Fascinating. Well, it sounds like we're landing on important. Any other important commentary on our important article? All right. Let's get to the next one, Akash. Oh, I just want to note, Michael Novak is joining us. He's saying that, this, of course, all what we're talking about here in verification sits within, a human technological system. It's not just a technology. And we're going to have to really reset that in organizations, as you were saying, Tim. I think I asked Adam to come at this. Is that right? No, Tim. Sorry, Tim.
Yep. So this is really interesting, but I'm going to rate it optional because of the lack of detail and early stage. This is an LLM based at physics, but nobody explained in this article what actually that means. I mean, you can understand it at a basic level. Instead of training on linguistic fragments, you train it on weather information, but they're saying they're not just training it on weather information, because that's been done for a long time. They're saying they're training it on underlying physics as well as weather data so that it will be a better predictor. That's really interesting if that's true, because it would be applicable to other things that people would be interested in the industrial world. It's so early. It's an early fundraising. So I'd rate it interesting but optional.
Tanya, you have an opinion on this guy?
Hi, John. To full honesty, I didn't get to read this one, but from what Tim is describing, it sounds like it's there's still work to be done. And the way we've rated these articles in the past has been, if the product is not yet out there and available, showing customers using it, we typically rate them optional.
Yeah, optional, John, in my book.
All right. Paul, anything to make it not optional?
Yeah, no, I'm an optional. The only thing I would highlight is I think I still have Stefan Wolfram in the back of my head saying, and John as well, as this is all computable reality. And so much we've seen is computable reality in a digital world, where we're taking language in 25 different languages and doing it real time. And, this is starting to look at physical attributes and digitize those. So it's, we're in a whole new world here.
Awesome. Kevin Petrie notes, this seems like a pretty small number given, trying to compute reality, $16 million, not a lot of dough. But it's going to get interesting. All right. And we have the last article coming up, Ankash.
So this is from OpenAI. So it explains OpenAI's plan to make AI more democratic.
Yes. Adam, did you have a chance to go through this bad boy?
Yes and no. I'll try and refrain in a public forum from saying nasty things about 15-minute reads on Time articles, but I would consider this optional. I think there's a lot of content there and very little really useful information that we don't already know about sort of the bigger landscape of trying to democratize these processes and getting input from experts. And I don't think I could, for honesty, recommend someone take the time to read this.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I find the topic fascinating. Not that I'm set heavily into politics or anything, but I found it fascinating, and I wanted to finish reading it, but it was just too much, right? But I like this whole idea of people who are in power with these technologies, kind of putting it out there to the people and saying, hey, we don't want to make all the rules that are going to run these models and these decisions. Let's put out some grant money out there, and if you come up with a good idea, let's explore that. So I like that idea. That's what the article is talking about. How much of it is true or not, we have to allow time to kind of, let us know. But I like that idea of realizing that, hey, there's a lot of power in how these decisions are being made. We cannot restrain those decisions in a small group of people. We need to have representation, and that they're going to these not-for-profit organizations who have done some of this work, right? But more human-based, right? Having human facilitators gathering that information, the sentiment of what people really believe. So anyway, from that perspective, I thought it was a great article. But yeah, I didn't get to finish reading it, to be honest. I gave it an optional for our audience. I know we're going into an election year, and I know we've talked in the past, there are many countries that are going through election, but overall, I gave it an optional.
I will say one thing in fairness, and that's if people are unfamiliar with Polis, the other technology that's discussed in this article, it's worth understanding what they're doing. I was already familiar with them, so perhaps for me that has less of an impact. But they're really in some ways looking how we can evolve the democratic process with technology and solve some of the problems and the limitations of the existing processes through the implementation of technology and the ability to crowdsource information and input and bias and all of those things. And that would be the reason I think this could be considered important.
Yes.
And so I'd sort of point towards that as a point, but otherwise I would still say optional.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Paul.
Because you have the display of all the articles and the ratings.
Yes, Paul, bringing that up.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, Polis is really interesting, but I'm skeptical. I won't call it grant washing yet, but I'm skeptical that OpenAI would change anything they do based on anything that happens here, which is the real test. But we'll have to wait and see.
The other thing. Oh, go ahead, Luda. Sorry.
I think it is optional. First of all, it's a very long read, and this polling thing happens, I think, on page 18. So I really think it's very a tall order for somebody to read it through. I'm also skeptical with Tim that this will actually happen. This whole software programmers who push technology forward always were democratic, always. There's always this desire to have it open source. This wave of AI is actually doing much better than before in terms of open source ability to put all these tools together for people to use. This is really great. And federated social media coming to fruition. So all five for that. But I think I'm very skeptical that we can influence large players with that yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, it was this notion of deliberative AI as a category. It was the first time I've seen that. Bill Wendell in our comment section is talking about what he'd like to have a homeowner's bill of rights enabled. I think one of the interesting things here is that the definition and the mechanisms, the definition of what democracy is and what the public will is, and in this case, Bill's thing, the definition of what the homeowner's rights are. I think that this stuff is really questioning fundamental definitions. And if you look at the structure of the American democracy, there's a bunch of institutions built in to make sure the mob doesn't take over. So there are compromises, whether it's 2/3 or timing or power structures, and I think this is going to really challenge all of those institutional activities. Anyway, so we're going to rate it as optional. Important to understand Polis and think about, we're going to get to some fundamentals. Anything else really important before we get to our conclusion here?
Joan, I just wanted to point out there was another part of this article that I thought was interesting, that based on what everybody says, I can't remember if it was Polis or the other company, they generate a policy document, gets generated automatically. And I was thinking, well, maybe that's a application that can transfer to corporations, right? Get feedback from employee engagement and then draw a policy around that that already has consensus built into it. Anyway, that was the last thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think the challenging thing underneath that, if I remember from the article, is that okay, how do you weight those? Is it simple democracy? Is it diversity? And then in a corporate setting, does the person who owns 50% of the company have more vote than person who owns 1% or none? Anyways, it's going to get very interesting. All right, in terms of our overall ratings here, we got important on the scams, optional on Roblox, important on fake IDs and semaphore in terms of meta reporting and a new platform for interoperability, and then optional on raising $16 million to describe all of physics reality and a plan to make things more democratic. Well, I hope that you found that useful. I want to thank all of our analysts in terms of reviewing these and so forth. This is John Sviokla coming to you from GAI Insights. Thanks for joining us and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.